As we go here to Atlanta, look at this win total, 4.5. NFC South 30-1, NFC 125-1 to win the conference. These guys are long shots to win anything this year. 250-1 to win the Super Bowl. And last year's record 7-12. So the big departure, of course, is Matt Ryan no longer with this squad. Pretty big difference, right? Desmond Ritter's a guy they drafted. They bring in Marcus Mariota as well. Arthur Smith, the head coach there, former offensive coordinator with the Tennessee Titans, has spent some time with Marcus Mariota as his quarterback, and they had moments. They certainly had moments together, and I'm sure that's why they brought him in, right? Arthur Smith probably feels comfortable with Marcus Mariota. We haven't seen him as a starting quarterback in quite some time. He did have some moments, as I mentioned, with the Tennessee Titans. There's a couple that stand out. A playoff game against the Pats. He had a playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I do remember one game where he threw the football. It bounced off somebody's helmet right to him. He caught it and he ran it in himself. Has some rushing upside. Last year, we only saw him in like red zone packages or like 4th down, 4th and 1. Coming in for Derek Carr. And, they used him pretty decently in Vegas, in that role in Las Vegas. So let's see. Can he be a quarterback one? No. Can he be a number 2 for you in Superflex leagues? I think so, potentially, right? Just with his rushing upside, I think he could be. I also think we'll see Desmond Ridder, right? I think they have to. I think you have to see what you have in Desmond Ridder, because next year's quarterback draft class is really good. It's pretty strong. So, and the Falcons are going to have probably a top 5 pick yet again. Are they not? They're probably going to have a top pick. Under 4.5 wins. If they don't win 5 games, they're going to have a top pick. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Them, Seattle, Jacksonville. I think these teams are going to be one of the worst teams. And then if you show Ridder, if you start the season with Mariota, which I do believe that they will, and things aren't working out with him, maybe they make that switch halfway through, and then you get a good sample. Maybe you can get 7 to 10 games of Desmond Ridder to see what they have. Maybe he wins the battle in camp. It's possible, right? It's not like Marcus Mariota is like a phenomenal quarterback that's going to blow everybody away and he's going to be the guy. I think he is, because of the experience and the familiarity that he has with Arthur Smith. But you got to see what you have in Ridder. You just have to see if he's the quarterback of the future. And if he's not, then you get back into drafting somebody next year. And it's just the way it is. This quarterback class just wasn't phenomenal, wasn't fantastic. But offensively, this team was just so brutal last year. Football Outsiders 28th overall. 25th in pass DVOA, 31st in rush DVOA. Only Houston worse. They averaged 85 rushing yards per game. The Texans averaged 83.6 rushing yards per game. Is it going to get much better? I don't think so. 18.4 points per game overall, 7th fewest in the NFL. Football Outsiders defensively, 30th. Against the pass, 29th. Against the rush, 29th. They allowed 131 rushing yards per game. Teams got up on them big, throwing the rock against them, weak secondary, and then they just ran out the clock against them in the second half. 131 rushing yards per game. I remember always picking on this team from a DFS standpoint, taking a running back against that squad. Always heavy favorites against the Falcons. You figured the team would run out the game running the rock against the squad, and that's what happened quite a bit. They allowed 364 yards per game, which was the 7th most, and then 27 points per game overall. Only the Jets and the Lions allowed more points than the Atlanta Falcons last year. Let's look at some of their weapons and where these guys are going in drafts. So I gave the benefit of the doubt to Marcus Mariota because he is going as quarterback 31. I actually drafted Desmond Ridder as like my last pick in the Scott Fish Bowl as just a 3rd quarterback. I mean, why not? I don't expect a whole lot from him. Cordarrelle Patterson is a complete fade for me, but it is interesting to see where he's going, right? As RB35, a guy that finished as RB9 overall last year in a full point setting, 14.7 fantasy points per game. He only had double-digit carries 5 times last year. He never had a game with more than 16 carries. In Week 12 against the Jags, he had 16 for $108. Against Carolina, he had 16 for 58. He had a couple games earlier in the season with 14 carries against the Jets and Miami, but he wasn't super efficient with those carries. 54 yards on 14 carries, 60 yards on 14 carries. Not ideal, but you know what? He was a big player in the passing game. There's no question. Week 2, 5 grabs. Week 3, 6 grabs. Week 4, 5 grabs. Week 5, 7 grabs. Week 8, 5 grabs. Week 9, 6 grabs. There was multiple games where this guy was getting anywhere from 5 to 7 targets and 4 or 5 catches a game. He had 4 receiving touchdowns. He had one game against Washington where he had 3 receiving touchdowns, and that's where he really kind of came onto the scene, and he was a big waiver wire pickup after Week 4 against Washington, where he had those 5 grabs for 82 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. They found found a way to use him where other teams just could not find a way to use him. He's been on multiple teams. Remember when he was drafted from the Vikings, he was very, very raw. He hadn't played a lot of college football, not a lot of high school football. They basically used him as a punt returner. He's very explosive. I give credit to the Falcons for finding a way to use him, but I'm not in on drafting guys who were big waiver wire hits the year before. Could be a one-year wonder. Matt Ryan's not the quarterback anymore, right? So we're dealing with some struggles, some inexperience at the quarterback position, whether it's Ritter or Mariota. I'm just out on Cordarrelle Patterson. And I think Tyler Allgeier could be a really good target, not costing a whole lot as RB49. It's not a team that, will run a lot. They're going to be forced to throw, but he's a big body running back who could be the goal line back. Cordarrelle Patterson's probably not going to be the goal line back. They want to see what they have there in Tyler Allgeier. I think that he's going to be the lead running back, and I think they'll move Cordarrelle Patterson all over the football field. I'm fine with where Jake London's going. Let's be honest. It's London and it's Kyle Pitts. I like that they brought in Bryan Edwards on the cheap, right? A nice little buy low candidate. Familiar with Marcus Mariota. These guys were probably running the number 2 offense with the Raiders last year behind Derek Carr. We never really seen Edwards as a starting wide receiver with the Raiders. Just never saw him. They bring in Adams. There's no use for him. I don't want to say that he's a complete bust. I definitely don't agree with all the comparisons of Des Bryant and Terrell Owens that were shot out there when they drafted Edwards, but I still think there's some upside there. He's not going to cost you a whole lot. Auden Tate's another guy that could show up at moments. He's got a nice catch radius from the Bengals. I've always been a fan of Auden Tate. We'll see if he can get some work in here. But it's Drake London as the number 1 wide receiver. But it's all about Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is the only guy that I want on this Falcons squad. Tight end 3. Last year, overall, he didn't finish as a top 5 tight end. But the yards were there. He had the 3rd most yards overall among tight ends with 1,000. He had 68 grabs and 110 targets. So the quarterback play is going to be down a little bit, but they moved him all over the field. He's a mismatch, clearly. He only had 1 receiving touchdown. That game came in London. I think we're going to see more touchdowns from him this season as well. I would much rather have Kyle Pitts than Mark Andrews, than TJ Hawkinson, than Dallas Goedert, even though those guys, are going a little bit later on. A little bit cheaper, but Kyle Pitts is the guy that you want. He's basically a wide receiver 1, and you're getting him in the 3rd or 4th round. I think he's a really, really strong candidate, and I think Drake London is as well. He's a really nice wide receiver. It just takes some time for this offense to kind of get going. I don't expect a whole lot from him this year. I agree with you, Daily Handle. Under 4.5 wins. I don't think that they win a lot of games.